Canada is ready to take the next giant leap in communications. Fifth-generation wireless communications, or 5G, will exponentially increase both the speed and capabilities of our networks. Through an unprecedented public-private sector collaboration, encqor establishes the first Canadian pre-commercial corridor of 5G ultra-high-speed digital infrastructure. The $400 million partnership is comprised of 5 leading global technology companies and the governments of Canada, Quebec, and Ontario. From Ontario to Quebec, this cross-provincial testbed will develop the technology of the future and determine how we communicate. More than just wireless, 5G networks of tomorrow rely on fast, flexible, secure, software-driven optical infrastructures. The effects of 5G will be felt in every area of our lives, in our homes, with billions of Internet of Things devices connected around the world, in our fully autonomous vehicles, and in our smart cities, where real-time data will improve traffic flow. 5G will also transform healthcare, allowing patients to be seen, diagnosed, and even operated on by doctors located anywhere. These powerful networks will also power the next smart grid, giving workers and customers the ability to connect by recording and sharing real-time video, mapping, and providing augmented reality views, all while simultaneously updating back-end systems. Mobile speeds will increase over 100 times, with current speeds of tens of megabits per second accelerating to 10 gigabits per second and beyond. In addition, travel time for data, known as wireless network latency, will be reduced from about 50 milliseconds to a goal of 1 millisecond with 5G, enabling a range of new applications in real time. Through 5G, small and medium-sized enterprises will redevelop industries and become global leaders, stimulating innovation and generating new revenue. Through encqor, SMEs, large corporations, and researchers from both public and private sectors will gain vital pre-commercial access to 5G networks to unlock technological promise and drive long-term economic growth. The future of Canada is connected. encqor will help Canadians reach the next plateau in the digital economy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today on the 5G wireless market and the encqor 5G program. I'm Tim Kostyniuk, Senior Director of Digital Economy Technologies at the Ontario Centres of Excellence, and I'll be your webinar moderator today. The global 5G market is estimated to be over $3.5 trillion, according to management consulting firm Arthur D. Little and Ericsson. And if you're interested in finding out more details about that, it's available for download on the Ericsson website. Now, in the webinar today, we're going to deepen the conversation about the business transformation enabled by 5G wireless, this huge market potential, and the exciting opportunities available for small, medium companies in the encqor 5G program. The encqor program, it's a public-private partnership that has built and delivered the first Canadian pre-commercial 5G wireless testbed for open innovation. It's a collaboration of 3 levels of government: Ontario, Quebec, and federal, the 5 industry partners, Ericsson, Ciena, Thales, IBM, and CGI, and then 4 program delivery partners. We've got Ontario Centres of Excellence in Ontario, and then in Quebec, there's Innovation encqor, Cefrio, and Prompt. The program provides a 5G wireless testbed access to small, medium companies to support their innovation developments, to develop new technologies, new products, and services that are related to 5G. The objectives of the program are all about creating jobs, driving economic growth, and enabling global competitiveness of Canadian firms. In Ontario, with the program, there are 3 innovation hubs for small, medium companies to gain free access to the testbed. They also get access to technical resources from Ericsson and Ciena. There's free access to 5G devices, as well as business advisory services from the hubs to support their efforts. The hubs are located in 3 cities in Ontario. They are at Communitech in Waterloo, Mars in downtown Toronto here, and then finally Invest Ottawa in the city of Ottawa. For our webinar here today, we've got two great speakers here, and they are David Everingham. He's the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of Ericsson Canada, and then also Rod Wilson, the Chief Technologist of Research Networks at Ciena Corporation. The format of the webinar is we're going to have about a 30-minute conversation talking about the 5G market, and then followed by about a 10-minute question and answer session for the audience. At this time, let me turn it over to our guests to introduce themselves and their organizations. Let's start with you, David.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tim. Good afternoon to everyone watching online. It's a real privilege to have the opportunity to join you here today, take part in this webinar, and share some perspectives on 5G and the opportunity that Ericsson sees. So before we jump in, I'd just like to take a couple of minutes to introduce myself and Ericsson. So as Tim said, my name's David Everingham. I currently serve as the CTO for Ericsson here in Canada, and I'm based in Toronto. So just at a glance, who is Ericsson? So we're a global telecommunications leader, an absolute leader in wireless. We are headquartered in Stockholm. We do business in over 180 countries globally. Nearly 100,000 employees. We've got almost 4,000 employees here in Canada. I'll talk through that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And notably, a very strong patent portfolio, very strong R&D capability in the company, particularly as we now enter the 5G era. This becomes even more critical. So in Canada, Ericsson is based in 3 main hubs. As I mentioned, Toronto is where I'm situated. That's our head office. We also have large presence in Montreal and in Ottawa, which are large R&D sites and where we have a lot of services personnel supporting our businesses, not just here in the Canadian market, but also helping serve our customers globally. I think I'm proud to mention also that Ericsson here in Canada was rated number 9 in a recent survey of the top 25 employers in Canada, which is a fantastic recognition of the way we do business here. So that's a wonderful thing. I've just popped in one slide to set the context around 5G. As of April this year, Ericsson marked over 45 operator partnerships, MOUs and the like with operator partners on 5G. This is over and above the dozens of other engagements we have with industry and academia on 5G research and development. I think that puts us in a very strong position to come here and talk to you today about the opportunity we see in 5G. As you see by the chart, we're working with the leading companies globally that are wireless operators in their business, seeing 5G as an opportunity for growth. We are working closely to understand not only the technology implications, but also the business opportunities as everyone strives to see how that creates new growth for their businesses and a new era of capability across the ecosystem. So I'll leave it there. Thanks very much, Super. Tim. Looking forward to the conversation today.
That's a phenomenal list of customers you're working with. So great to see that. Rod, let's have you introduce yourself and Ciena.
Well, what a great introduction. Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Tim. My name is Rodney Wilson. I am the Chief Technologist for Research Networks based in Ciena's Ottawa R&D labs. My responsibilities include our interaction with universities around the world as we try and unlock the future of telecommunications science and technologies. I'm also responsible for Ciena's interworkings with research and education networks. In Ontario, people use, education institutions use Orion. Across Canada, it's Canary, and similar organizations around the world. At Ciena, we recognize that the way the world uses networks is changing, and changing very fundamentally. Users want a completely different experience. People want to use new applications, new ways. They want increased mobility. They want capabilities that allow them to thrive in whatever environment they're working in. So we're striving to respond to meet the exploding volume of traffic, the demand that's coming from networks because of these transformational applications. And so as a company, we're trying to respond with networks that not only deliver fabulous high bandwidth capacity, but are also able to adapt to these different environments, to respond with new internet intent-based applications and controls, and sort of an ever-changing set of requirements. So it's a really daunting environment to work in. It's also incredibly exciting. So it's a privilege to share some of this information with you today. We call this adaptive networking, and without getting into too many details, it kind of breaks down into programmable infrastructures, software control and automation, and advanced intelligence on the way networks perform. And all this built on ultra-high capacity networks as an optical infrastructure. So we're really working on this as a company globally. But what people may not be aware of is the success that we've had in delivering these systems worldwide. We have an incredible number of customers that are both service providers that provide traditional and advanced services, enterprises that are providing cloud services and unique machine-to-machine capabilities, and government agencies and research and education networks that help deliver the research and advanced services platforms necessary to grow the future of Canada's leadership, global leadership. A couple of fun facts about Ciena in Ottawa. We have a 3-building campus, home to just shy of 2,000 employees. We have additional employees in Montreal, several hundred there. Our Ottawa footprint includes over 1,700 R&D professionals, and almost every product that Ciena makes has a home or a footprint in our Ottawa labs. It's over 79,000 square feet of lab space. We consume just shy of 2 megawatts of power to power our labs. The air conditioning is equivalent to about 200 large homes. So it's a very substantial facility. Inside the labs are over 2,600 networking elements connected with over 40,000 IP addresses. There are over 110,000 kilometers of fiber run as a test bed, as a capability to recreate the demands that these customers might have. So we can simulate almost any network in the world based on old fiber, new fiber, different systems. The work that we do in this lab is quite interesting. We hire employees to look at high-capacity optical infrastructure, which I've already mentioned, but also how these systems can scale with real-time software, real-time control systems. We do some high-performance integrated circuit design. We do digital signal processing systems, optical components, as well as software for these adaptive control systems, network telemetrics, and analytics. So it's a very rich portfolio of activities that generate a lot of patents, intellectual property, and partnerships. So Ciena's labs in Ottawa are arguably the state of the art in the world, but certainly their most advanced photonic systems labs in Canada, and both hardware and software. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today. That's my introduction, my snapshot on myself and on Ciena. Let's get onward with the webinar.
That's great. Thanks, Rod. So what I wanted to do was just go through how I thought we'd attack the topic here. And in the spirit of the 5 of 5Gs, let's use the 5 Ws. The what, the when, the where, the who, and the why. So let's start this first off. The first question for you, David. So what is 5G wireless and the status of the technology development?
Sure, that is a great place to start. So I think the first thing to point out is 5G is not just like the previous Gs that have come before it. I know that does sound like a bit of a cliche, but what's incredible about this era is the 5G system is being specified for an incredible amount of flexibility and agility in terms of the use cases and the services it'll be able to support. So that means that we'll see 5G networks emerge in different ways, different deployment topologies, supporting different use cases, delivering different types of services with different business opportunities in mind. But that's incredible because it means we're going to benefit from a global ecosystem of capability, both from infrastructure and devices and the like, that will drive costs down and create opportunities for businesses. I think the other thing that's quite interesting is oftentimes we talk about 5G largely in terms of the access network, and we'll spend some time on that here today as well. It introduces new spectrum, it introduces new capability, that sort of thing. But 5G is much more than that. It's a complete network platform, and that's the way Ericsson addresses our 5G proposition in terms of our product strategy and what we bring to market. So as 5G emerges, it's happening at the same time as we see the emergence of cloud computing technologies, edge compute for one example. AI and machine learning are also maturing at a pace now that together with the 5G network, we'll actually be able to use these technologies together to create the new services. And that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, cool. So what are those, you mentioned new capabilities. What are the new capabilities in 5G that we don't have today in 4G? So one of the main starting points to introduce the 5G network is providing access to new spectrum bands. That's necessary so as the systems can increase their capacity and serve the increasing amount of traffic that's demanded by end users. So with that comes the ability to increase the throughput peak rate, so even higher throughputs, extreme speeds, multi-gigabit per second throughputs. That opens up the opportunity for new types of services that we can't always do with 4G today. Or at the very least, it ultimately gives us a platform that will allow those sorts of high data rate services to really scale and be delivered en masse. The other key characteristic, of course, that comes with the new architecture in 5G is shortening end-to-end latency massively. And that, of course, opens up the opportunity for more real-time services. We talk about things like the Internet of Eyes, for example, which is the ability to do sort of real-time haptic feedback with ultra-low latency capabilities. Those are the sort of extreme use cases we can't do with 4G today. Things like a remote surgery or remote control of a vehicle, where if the network latency is too high, you wouldn't be able to do it. Whereas you're saying with 5G, we're going to be able to do that more effectively.
Yeah. I mean, there's some good examples. I think other ones that I think help paint the picture well for people. With that improvement in end-to-end latency, we can actually offboard compute intensity from end user devices, move that to the edge of the network, and be able to create new capabilities and new use cases that
so
we
more
can't
at the base station, the 5G base station, instead of going back to a centralized data center.
Can be at the base station, can be and probably will be at transport aggregation hubs and other points in the network. I think the point there is that compute infrastructure becomes an elastic resource across the network, and we'll have orchestration capabilities to secure the resources you need to meet the SLAs of the service, and do that in a dynamic and a real-time way.
Excellent. So some real new capabilities. So higher bandwidth, lower latency, and it sounds like a lot more software programmability in the network to enable a whole new range of applications.
This is where I was sort of getting at when I said 5G is designed with agility in mind.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that's been challenging with previous network architectures and the way that you configure the services is the time and effort and the resource intensity it takes to configure the network and the system so that you can deliver the services and the use cases you want to. We're moving into a world now that with software-defined technologies, that programmability is uplifted a lot, and that'll enable the operators of these networks to manage the systems and deliver experiences in a way that you wouldn't be able to do in a practical sense because of the complexity involved, unless that automation's there behind it.
So being able to deliver those end-to-end network slices that say a high demanding, low latency application requires, that's going to be enabled with these 5G networks. Excellent.
We can do some of that today, but it's more manual. It won't scale as well. 5G really brings these capabilities to life.
Fantastic. Rod, let's get you in on this one. What do you see in terms of the 5G rollout?
Well, it's a great segue, because I often view this as software-defined everything. but one of the buzzwords in industry for several years has been software-defined networking. And so the ability to make networks kind of fluid and ability to accommodate these unique applications, these new demanding devices and connections is really key. So you're right. A lot of the work that's being done is around software innovation to create the control framework so that these networks can actually perform as a holistic entity. So it's not just the endpoint that's high performance, but the entire system has to be high performance and secure and reliable. So that's actually a huge body of work and an opportunity for SMEs to explore. Of course, Ciena is also very involved in creating new higher speed transmission systems, so the ability to aggregate and flow huge amounts of traffic from the endpoints, be they the cell towers themselves, base stations, or aggregation points. And so systems that exceed 100, 200, 300, or even 400 gigabits per second are available now. But they have to be deployed in these flexible environments because the characteristics of the networks are becoming much more amorphous, much more agile.
Okay, excellent. So let's go to the second question on the when side. So I'll start with you, Rod, on this one. So when is 5G going to go mainstream and the expected lead adopter applications for it?
Well, I'd certainly like to focus on the lead adopter applications because I think that's where things get exciting. There are a number of factors in the rollout of technology and the way platforms, spectrum, and things that we'll talk about in a moment. But certainly the use cases are really what's going to drive the adoption. So we touched on a couple of examples here. But I saw a fantastic demonstration of augmented reality. You know, we know like 2 summers ago what happened with Pokemon Go, when the entire world was taken over by small low-speed appliances looking for augmented characters in a game. This becomes much more serious and a much more profound industrial application if you're able to look inside a piece of machinery to maintain it, or if you're able to get assisted education that allows you to actually experience the environment. And these kinds of use cases really become possible in a 5G world. And I think that's a future. That's coming over the next 18, 24 months, driven by the innovation we find in small and medium enterprises.
Excellent. David, what are your thoughts on the lead adopter applications?
So look, at the moment, I think we're seeing the initial 5G deployments are focusing mainly on connectivity-centric consumer applications. So fixed wireless is one example that you see a lot of news about at the moment. You know, there's examples of that being launched as 5G services already today. Enhanced mobile broadband, or EMBB as we call it, is probably the next sort of leading use case as 5G gets introduced. That's really, in a way, more of the same. You know, that's where 5G just becomes an augmentation to the 4G network, at least in its first form. Standalone 5G comes next. But that's where we're actually adding capacity and capability to existing networks to serve the increased traffic demand.
Okay. So like Rod's example about augmented reality, that enhanced mobile broadband would be an enabler for that type of application.
Well, from the perspective that you're just relying on more network capacity to drive the transmission of video and richer content and the like. But I think for some of the AR use cases to really come to life, you've got to actually then step into that re-architecture of the network, start to introduce the compute fabric closer to the edge where the end device is consuming that content.
Okay.
And in many cases, it's user-generated content that's being processed at the edge and enriched as well. So there's a number of things that need to happen together to enable these new use cases.
Okay.
You know, we should also pay some attention to Internet of Things. It's not hard to imagine 100 devices in your home, 100 different applications, appliances, telephones, mobile phones, thermostats, other devices. It's not hard to imagine 100 of them. Well, there are 4.2 million households in Ontario. And if everybody turns all that stuff on, we better have the software to understand the telemetrics in the network, the analytics, and create the use case scenarios that allow us to accommodate this massive change in uses and users.
So what it evokes for me is when you look at 5G, it's analogous to what happened with 4G, about 10 years ago. When you look at companies like Uber, did not exist, but they were enabled by the introduction of 4G networks and with data, and then smartphones, and they built the whole business around ride sharing and Uber Eats.
The way things are evolving are changing very, very fundamentally, Tim.
Yeah.
I mean, we started off with like one-way communications, user to computer or to device. We're now at a stage where it's data-driven. People want to access social media. They want their data in the cloud. They want to share their photographs. They want to do all that kind of stuff. Just around the corner is machine-assisted delivery of services. And in the future, it'll be fully automated, autonomous infrastructures. And 5G is part of the vehicle that's going to create that chain of events that will unfold over the next not very long.
So 5G is the next major platform for application development is what I'm taking away here.
We can spend a second on IoT. I think one good way to think about it is there's different categories of IoT. Recently we've seen a lot of work going in to building up the capability for cellular IoT in the 4G context, introducing Cat-M1 and narrowband.
Right.
So there's a lot of use cases that are starting to emerge now. I would say we're not even seeing the full scale yet because the device ecosystem is still maturing. But that'll be what starts to introduce the billions of devices in the network. Okay. Ones that aren't particularly delay sensitive. But they have other unique characteristics such as having very low power consumption, very long device lifetime, many of them are battery powered, this kind of thing. But then the 5G system will cater from those sorts of use cases on one end through the IoT use cases that are, let's say, more akin to a mobile broadband set of network characteristics into more critical IoT capabilities where resilience and reliability and quality of service is paramount. Okay. And an even more extreme case of that, which I think we're calling industrial IoT, which is where you start to see cellular technology like 5G underpinning smart manufacturing, for example, where the manufacturing environment becomes wireless as well, and you can pull cables out of that environment. So that's what I was trying to paint that picture of in the beginning, where the capability of 5G is very broad, and we'll see that the uses and the deployment methods that are adopted by different players across the world are maybe targeted. Maybe some will do more than one, some will focus in some areas. But as a technology platform, it's got incredible capability.
So it's a continuum of applications that are going to be enabled on this 5G rollout. Okay, that's great. So let's go to our next question about where. So let's target this one at you, David. So where's 5G being rolled out?
So interestingly, 5G's really started in North America and in the US first and foremost. You're very quickly behind it, of course, Northeast Asia, specifically South Korea has already launched networks going live already in the last month or so. So that's where we see the initial momentum. But of course, many countries are starting to make plans for 5G introduction. So, here in Canada, just recently, the 600 megahertz auction just concluded. A lot of the major players secured spectrum there. Rogers notably secured a very good spectrum asset, investing $1.7 billion into the economy in doing so.
Those are big numbers. 1.7 with a B.
Well, I think the total raised for that auction was $3.5 billion.
Wow, and that's just one spectrum range.
So that's a really key spectrum band for 5G. That's a low band asset that is crucial for wide area coverage. Right. Most wide area, sort of nationwide or regional, but typical operator networks will use that in concert with mid-band spectrum and ultimately high-band millimetre wave spectrum when that is available in Canada. Okay. Holistically, these assets provide the ability to provide both breadth of coverage and targeted capacity. In the US, millimetre wave spectrum became available sooner, so the networks that are already launching there now are on the very high band.
Okay, so we've already auctioned that spectrum.
That's already happened, and the networks are being built like that. So it's happening in different ways in different parts of the world.
Who were the lead operators in the US that got that millimetre wave spectrum?
So AT&T and Verizon have already launched networks in different bands of millimetre wave, but they're both millimetre wave networks.
And those are on your customer. I noticed the customers that Ericsson is engaged with.
Yeah, so look, Ericsson is proud to be involved with leading operators in all markets globally. And as I mentioned in the opening, right, I think we have also had a long history of collaboration and engagement with industries and with academia as we look to understand the use of 5G. And I think that's a really important piece as well, and we'll step into this further in the conversation, I think. But programs like encqor are critical, right? Because it's the opportunity for the technology providers to work with the end users of the technology and companies that can find opportunities in between to create those solutions and create value that way. If we're not working outside our sort of own four walls and starting to talk with companies that will have pain points and need technologies like 5G to overcome that, it'll be very difficult to unlock the innovation. And that's why we need these sorts of programs.
Good, so you're looking for partners, and excellent. Rod, what are you seeing in terms of the rollout of 5G and networks to support that?
Well, a lot of the service providers, of course, are out building their infrastructure in order to accommodate this. Physical construction takes time, and so there's a bit of a building boom underway as companies build the infrastructure and the backhaul systems necessary to accommodate this. So every tower, every base station has a connection, and that connection has to be secure and reliable. And so that's the flurry of activity right now. It's a busy time.
So those build-outs are occurring now, and you're putting those optical and IP networks in place to join up to what Ericsson is doing on the radio side.
Yeah, and as a community, certainly the industry is moving. For years there was kind of a fiber glut. There was excess fiber in the ground, and a lot of that has been used up, repurposed, and gone. The other characteristic of it, though, is it's not suitable for some of the ultra-high speed solutions that are necessary to make these systems work in a holistic way. So that's a big part of it. Industry is also working on, as I mentioned before, the software control systems, the tools necessary to easily provision these networks. Right. We have to move to a much more automated setup capabilities so that the network can self-respond in some cases to flows and traffic. Years ago, the inspiration for some of this was at the World Cup, and there was a winning goal, and 50,000 people had their cell phone went click, send. And we kind of know what happened, right? So while there's the end user experience that's going to be impacted by these capabilities, I think the real differentiator is going to be in the novel new applications and solutions that we'll find in Canadian innovators as well as others.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point. The effort it takes to re-architect these networks and evolve them to support 5G is an enormous task. It's a huge transformation. Behind that, of course, is the organisation change that needs to happen as well in terms of skills and competence and people's ways of working. One example that we are working with a lot at the moment is, as you introduce network virtualisation and then cloudification of the core network, the way that companies like Ericsson deliver software into that environment moves more to an agile, continuous delivery process, is one example. The way in which operators would then receive, test, industrialise, deploy, all of that changes. This is an enormous amount of work that needs to happen, as well as just getting standards defined and products built and software written.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to our next W. which is the who. And I'll direct this one at you, Rod. So who will benefit from engaging in the encqor 5G program?
You know, the encqor program was inspired, created through the public-private partnership that Tim mentioned in the opening, Tim, to allow Canadian innovators, people with ideas, smaller companies, medium companies, different enterprises, to gain access to early capabilities, a test bed that would allow them to actually try their applications, a partnership and an ecosystem that would give them ability to actually find new ways to commercialize and monetize their inventions. And that was the real inspiration behind encqor. Now the 5 multinational companies that have conspired together to create this capability also have significant investments in Canadian leadership. And for Canada to win, we need to find ways to work together in new and creative approaches to these technologies. The what, I think it's a highly imaginative question, right? We can think of all sorts of really novel ideas. I had an interesting one on a trip that not long ago. The students were looking at EKG and health monitor patches, you know, the ones that get stuck to your chest and wired up to the computer, and they kind of take measurements and say you're healthy. They were doing some research and some prototyping to see if they could get those to operate wirelessly. Was there a way they could operate Bluetooth or maybe, you know, Wi-Fi to a certain extent? Now the work was actually being done in India, so they had a price limit that they wanted these patches, these wireless patches, to cost no more than $20 each. And so it's kind of small, portable, single-purpose computers. It was a really interesting piece of work, but their real goal was to be able to untether the patient, to give the patient the ability to be anywhere and recapture, and the physicians to capture, you know, real-time data and stuff like that. It's a novel approach. Maybe the other approaches with advanced timepieces, which, by the way, give you the time, but also do other things. So there's a world of opportunities out there, and we've seen a lot of them come forward through, through encqor in its initial years.
Yeah. And one thing I should add, I've been really impressed. In addition to the testbed access, Ericsson, Ciena, and Thales are also doing challenge statements with small, medium companies and academics in Ontario as part of encqor. So tell us a little bit about that. What are some of the challenge statements where you want to partner and find solutions from small, medium companies?
Well, the challenge statements that we've been working on in partnership with Ontario Centres of Excellence are really ideas that get posted. We don't know how to solve these problems. Some of the problems can be addressed by academic researchers, and there have been a number of programs that have been presented that way. And then there's some others where there's a partnership opportunity with the small or medium companies to actually gain access to the testbed, go live, and partner with companies like Ciena and Ericsson.
Yep.
I think you sort of said it very well in the opening. You know, for me, one of the key benefits of a program like encqor and how people that participate in it can benefit is not only access to the technology capabilities of the iPads, but also the sort of business mentoring and the access to people that can help take a concept and figure out, you know, where is the business value for that and how you could then turn that into a commercial proposition. Yeah. Because so many of the great ideas on Earth struggle to flourish because you actually haven't done that work at an early enough stage to see where the value is being created. I think one of the challenges of the 4G era was that new value pools emerged. Web-scale companies captured enormous amount of value. In many markets, the value of connectivity diminished and put a lot of pressure on service providers. I think one of the things that we're striving for with this kind of work with 5G and with a program like encqor is to find ways that show the value that connectivity provides and other capabilities that network providers can bring to the table that will then help, bring further growth into those businesses.
And that ties back well to that white paper on the 5G business potential. It really shows the pressure that global service providers and operators are under as their connectivity services are commoditized. So they're looking for what are those applications in new areas, new addressable markets, exactly. And that's what the 5G platform is really going to enable.
That's right.
True. And by way of actual examples, there have been a number of challenge statements that have to do with machine learning algorithms and how to create responsive networks. Cybersecurity is a huge area and a major concern for anyone that builds and operates networks. And then there are these interesting applications on the endpoints that tie into all the kind of things that happen with Internet of Things and end user applications. There's also a whole suite of activities around machine to machine, and how we connect to clouds and share information between private groups as well as social and public groups.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, let's move on to our last question, the W question. I'll give this one to you, David. So why should SMEs and small medium companies in Ontario be excited about 5G, and why is it advantageous for them to have access to this 5G pre-commercial testbed?
I think a really important thing to point out, and as maybe a start to answer that question and unpack that one, is because 5G is happening now, we're already seeing that the development is happening, networks are getting rolled out. This is the moment to engage and work with a program like encqor to incubate those ideas. It's not too early by any means. 5G has actually come faster than I think many of us expected probably 5 years ago, thought that it might arrive. Yeah. So that's a really important piece for anyone that's considering, why should I bother? Why would encqor be relevant for me? Yeah. And so, with that, the access that you're providing through the program to the testbed to get engaged with the partners like Ericsson, Ciena, Thales, IBM and CGI is critical as well. It's an entry point to take those ideas and incubate them into something that could turn into a larger business in the future.
Super. So there's an opportunity to get connected with Ericsson, Ciena, Thales, and your customers through the engagement in projects and finding those new applications.
Yeah, it becomes a vehicle for that.
Phenomenal. That's that's a great opportunity, and it is a global market, right? When you look at the companies, in Ontario, we're not just competing in the Canadian market. It's competing in the world. And this is that platform to enable that global scaling.
Of course, I'd love to think that ideas are coming through and projects are being done that actually benefit Canadians in the home market as well. Of course, the opportunity to go global is great, but the government and the region are investing in these programs as well, so as that Canadians can also benefit, I believe.
If I was a small, medium enterprise with a technology innovation in this space, what encqor represents is an accelerant. It becomes the ability to harden your technology, test your theories, test your product, test your business case in partnership in a very supportive, somewhat forgiving environment. There's no harm, no foul if there's failure in an experiment. As early adopters, you want to be able to take advantage of feedback loops that let you change your program and technology at lowest possible cost. Because once you're starting to roll out a product domestically or internationally, the cost complexities of correcting a major mistake is huge. And if you're a smaller organization, that can be crippling. So by working with an organization like the encqor testbed, it allows you to kind of harden and prove things out in a very novel and supportive way.
So you can use an agile development and try things in a low-risk environment, and then pivot if you need to, or keep.
Well, for example, if I was building a new network monitoring piece of equipment that was designed to support 5G wireless infrastructure, you have an infrastructure with traffic running on it. It's a real world thing. And you could use this as test data. You could, with almost no cost, jump on, take your measurements, find out what you can learn from this, again in a supportive environment. Take that back to your lab and your offices and refine your algorithms, your solution or product.
So, for example, if you're a small medium company in Waterloo that has an application that you want to do remote control of a robot in another city, you could do it into Toronto, into Ottawa, or even the 2 Quebec hub sites in Montreal or Quebec City, and actually do a live test of that capability in the network.
Yeah, it's a technology partnership, but also a people partnership.
Yeah.
So if we look at network innovations, the network can be a network of people, right? Not just the technologies that we've been talking about here. So the interpersonal opportunities that encqor represents are significant and substantial.
Yeah, phenomenal. It's great. I think we're good. Let's leave some time for the questions from the audience, because I'm sure there'll be a lot here. So I'm gonna pick up my my tablet here, and so what I would ask now is if you do have a question in the audience, please enter it in the text box on the right-hand side of your browser, and then we'll field some of the questions between the panelists here.
And we'll see how we do. This is always the most interesting part of the test.
That's right, getting some audience interaction here.
Yeah.
So first question here. How do we get more information about the IPaaS, and that stands for Innovation Platform as a Service, by the way, 5G testbed. So there's a lot of information on the OCE website, and encqor.ca has a description of the testbed, description of the capabilities, as well as a rollout of new capabilities. It's an evergreen type of testbed. So as Ericsson and Ciena add new capabilities, new software, new hardware into the testbed, new devices, that is actually on the website. I'll give this one to you, David. How would you compare 5G to DSRC technology?
DSRC. So DSRC, for those that are on the panel that are on the webinar that aren't listening, is direct short-range communication. So very popular in some of the V2X applications, and there's been a lot of OEMs driving that as a technology strategy for quite some time. I think one of the things that I see where a cellular solution that 5G could bring over something like DSRC is the fact that you don't necessarily need to go and roll out a bunch of new street infrastructure in order to build out that total network capability. By that I mean you've got the wide area coverage from the network, embedding cellular devices into the vehicles, the street lights, the other infrastructure that you want to control and manage as part of that intelligent transportation system, I think is a cheaper proposition overall for everyone, because you're part of a flourishing global ecosystem that is 3GPP and 5G for those types of use cases.
So as opposed to a dedicated network, this is a more flexible network for a range and a continuum of applications. Yeah.
Well, when you're trying to create solutions, anything that can be deployed faster and at lower cost and equal or better performance is probably a good formula for success.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was talking with one of the chief architects at Thales, and they do all the subway and train control systems. And today, most of the subway and train control systems, he was telling me, they actually have a dedicated wireless network for the train control, and that takes a lot of time to deploy those. There's a lot of cost, and they're unlicensed spectrum in many cases, and so reliability can be an issue. Exactly. So they're very interested in fact, they've launched a challenge statement to look at leveraging 5G for the train-based control. So the LRT, for example, in Ottawa is going to be commissioned imminently here. There's LRT in Toronto, and then around the world, Thales is a global company. Okay.
One of the things we haven't really sort of touched on so much, but maybe it's worth raising now is, we'll definitely see some scenarios where 5G is deployed as a private network solution.
Yes.
So the manufacturing case we touched on is a pretty good example of that. But even other types of specific, utility services where you're not necessarily relying on a wide area sort of need and use cases, where your devices and endpoints in the network might be more restricted, then perhaps it is cost effective to do private solutions.
Right.
And we'll see all of these things emerge.
Excellent. So, for example, mine.
Of course, mine's interesting depending on whether it's underground or above ground.
Right.
But then again, spectrum's needed to do it in a licensed arrangement.
Right.
And that's a whole maybe other discussion for another day. But
Okay.
yeah.
Super. One of the questions, I'll give this one to you, Rod. What are the opportunities for academics to engage in the encqor program to help develop the technology that industry is going to deploy globally?
Well, there have been numerous academic challenge statements that have been posted already. A lot of the work is exploring emerging machine learning and artificial intelligence control systems. Measurement and analytics has been a very attractive area. There are also some challenge statements that have been built around cybersecurity. So while we're talking about ease of use and connectivity and all these wonderful applications, this also has to operate in a secure and reliable environment. And nothing better than getting academics to try and find the loopholes and go deep on these kinds of topics. It represents a significant opportunity for academics. There have been some interesting work already. I know that there are additional project ideas and opportunities that will be coming forward in very few number of months.
Yeah, excellent. So here's a question. Great webinar, by the way. That was one of the. It's always a good way to butter up for a question, right? You get in the queue. Where did that question go? What kind of leadership skills? What are the top 2 to 3 critical leadership skills beyond technical proficiency do you see for talent that's interested in getting into this 5G world?
Oh, well, so, certainly there are regular leadership attributes of, determination and technical skills. The ability to be innovative is a key inspiration behind encqor. We wanted to establish Canadian leadership. So the opportunities there, if you have a good idea, an ability to put together a good proposal and be determined in delivering your thoughts and capabilities. I mean, other than that, it's kind of like typical leadership skills for any kind of incubator, startup, or innovator talent. I think is key.
And then having a clear view on how the business value is created by the technology solution, and being able to work with that and iterate that. I think that's key.
So really focus on a market problem, address it, iterate it, and then
understand clearly, who's the target market, where's the value, what value does this create,
exactly,
and ultimately,
and
where's the money,
and they're going to pay for it. Right. Yeah, that's some great advice, David. Here's another one, David, for you. Will 5G be able to address the need for high-speed access in remote rural communities?
Yeah, great question. So I think that kind of points to some of the fixed wireless examples that we see. So we've done quite a lot of work actually in Ericsson looking at the economics around fixed wireless access. I think in a 5G context, the newer spectrum and the advances in antenna technology opens up, when I say newer spectrum, the higher spectrum bands that are becoming available and are exploitable for cellular communications that's becoming available in the 5G era definitely makes the fixed wireless proposition move to a level where it's more like a fixed broadband, meaning that you're not constrained by having to manage either by data volume or peak rate in the same way. Right. So definitely we see 5G as a good solution for that. But then again, that also has a lot of considerations around the deployment architecture of those networks as well. One thing that I know a lot of the companies in rural Canada have been working with for a while is innovations around CPE deployments, the consumer equipment. Of course, with the very high frequency bands that 5G can use, that can be very susceptible to path loss indoors. So innovations on the user equipment antenna, the placement and how self-deployable that is all part of the problem to solve to make the economics around that solution work well.
Okay. Today, I know a lot of rural internet deployments. There's a lot of government subsidies. I've seen this in the U.S. I've seen it in Canada. Do you see that changing? Are the economics going to change with 5G versus other wireless technologies?
Look, I think there would still need to be systems like that to motivate going after business in those areas, because obviously there's not a great addressable market in terms of population in the regional and the rural communities. Yeah. But then I think as a society, broadband services are critical. Therefore, it is important to have schemes like that to make sure that people aren't left unconnected. Then you have other problems to deal with. Right. So I think the economics around the solution can be solved. 5G will improve the performance of the end user experience in some of the ways, as I mentioned, being able to unlock higher throughputs and larger data allowances. But it needs to be done in a way where the deployment of the system is carefully considered to get those economics right.
Okay. Got a last question here. So it's about, David, I'll give this one to you because it's, do you see the location tracking services provided by 5G being something that could replace GPS services, or are they complementary to those GPS services?
If I could jump in, there's some marvelous work being done based at University of Toronto on smart cities. Okay. And so the smart cities capability looks at a whole spectrum of different tools that you can use for everything from traffic problems as well as tracking network traffic. Right. And all the requirements of smart city and services delivery are changing very fundamentally. There's some work being, there's work done across Canada, but there's a very substantial project right here in Toronto, University of Toronto, that's drilling in specifically on that area of research. Yeah. GPS won't go away. I mean, it's a marvelous facility, but when we look at the applications, they have to be quite diverse. Right. They have to use all the information that's available, and 5G will offer some additional data points on those systems.
So it'll be complementary, is your take on that to GPS? Role for both?
Yeah, I think so.
David, anything to add?
No, nothing more to add on that. I'm conscious of time, so maybe if there was one more you wanted to take.
Great. I think that's good. I think we're good for the questions. So thank you both. Great Q&A.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So I want to thank the audience for those great questions. We hope you've enjoyed the 5G and SME webinar here today and understand a little bit more about the global opportunity created with 5G and the opportunity for your organization. I want to highlight there is a team, cross-Ontario team of business development managers at OCE that is ready and available to work with you on and support your projects to develop new technologies, products, or services with 5G. If you're interested in accessing the testbed and some of its capabilities, please engage with Chris Ritchie and Suthan Sivanasan. They are the 5G sector manager leads for OCE on this, and they and their other colleagues at OCE can work with you to support your projects on 5G. Two other important members of the team are Philippa King and Sarah Fairley. I want to give a shout out to them. They lead managing the encqor program delivery in Ontario, working with Ericsson, Ciena, Thales, and the other partners, working with the business development team. And they also are responsible for issuing new challenge statements. So you'll see those on the encqor.ca website as those get done. There's over 20 up there right now that Ericsson, Ciena, and Thales have launched and in various stages. So one other thing I want to mention is there is an exciting other event coming up here, and that's called Discovery. It's Canada's premier Innovation to Commercialization Conference, and it takes place in the next 2 weeks. It's May 13th to 14th in Toronto here, right at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. And if you haven't already registered, I encourage you to look at that. It's ocediscovery.com. Join thousands of attendees, hundreds of exhibitors. encqor is going to be there. I've seen some of the demos, they're incredible. Augmented reality, the drones, the autonomous vehicles. There's some great stuff. You want to see the future? Come to Discovery. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.